I have been playing Baldur's Gate 3 for the past few weeks, and I must say for sure that it's one of the best RPGs I have ever played, and it has made me feel things I haven't felt in a long time. And given all the controversy that's been talked about around the quality of that game in comparison with others of its class, it made me think about how we have been dealing with a decline in the quality of our games, and how much the RPG genre has suffered for this. I also think that for a long time RPGs became more of a niche genre, not usually coming to the mainstream, with big AAA gaming companies usually avoiding the genre unless they are from already established franchises, like Final Fantasy or Pokémon. And only a few games have made big waves, games like Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, and with this more recently, we might be witnessing even a renaissance of sorts of RPGs. But why was this? Why have RPG games been in this lethargic state in the past decades, and only in the recent years given more of a spotlight? Well, my search for this answer was arduous and unrelenting, and after many hours of research and meditation, I have finally reached the answer to this puzzle.
Greed!
This might be shocking news for many, but in my opinion, the main cause of the almost declining in RPG games is basically money. For this analysis, I will narrow my view on what affects the RPG genre, even though I know that much of the points I'm about to lay out affects the whole industry in different ways, so keep this in mind. So, why do I think money is the main cause of the problem? Well, first we need to understand that gaming companies are just that, companies. And the main goal of any company is to make money, and the bigger the company, the truer this becomes. With this in mind, let's talk a little about the state of the gaming industry. First, let's think about how many people worked back in the day to develop a good RPG game. Back in the day, these developer teams were really small, more of what now could be considered more of an indie studio. If we compare them with how many people it takes now for big studios to make AAA games, you can see how it now takes around 10 times more people to make an RPG game than in the 90s. And that's not all. The development time has also multiplied at least 2 times. Let's take Fallout as an example. How much does the first Fallout game cost to develop in the 90s? A quick Google search puts it at $3 million. Now let's see the latest mainline Fallout game, that will be Fallout 4. That's $150 million, that's 15 times more. The bottom line is that making games now is vastly more expensive than in the past. Let's be clear, I know there are modern awesome RPGs with small teams and smaller budgets, but right now I'm not talking about these indie developers. I'm focusing on the big studios, with a big presence that they have in the industry. Why? Well, because of how these big studios are the trendsetters. They are the ones that manipulate the public to want what they want you to want, even though you don't really want to. And if you really want something else, well, they will tell you.
You think you do, but you don't.
An example of this will be the features that modern games are usually full of, and this all began with the advent of mobile gaming. It is no mystery that mobile gaming has become a huge market, generating billions of dollars in revenue worldwide. And this huge revenue for companies usually came at a fraction of the cost and time a game usually needs to develop on other platforms. And it's here where terms like in-game purchases and freemium got popular. This constant influx of money instead of a one-time purchase bled outside of the mobile gaming space at some point, and now we have these terms plaguing all of modern gaming. So the thing about big video game companies like EA, Activision Blizzard and Ubisoft is that they are very reactive to changes on what the public wants. So, if they see that something works and is popular, they will lean into it, and if not, they will move on to some other thing. But they also want money, and money always trumps what the public wants. Always. So when they saw the opportunities that mobile games were creating, they latched onto it, and it started to innovate, with big game-changing ideas like battle passes and cosmetic purchases. You can see this on your Diablo 4s, your Call of Duties and your Fortnites. And I am very aware that some people will say that they love all these new features of modern games, and that's okay, good for you. I'm really not here today to rant about those kind of practices. What I'm trying to do is paint a picture of what the reality of modern gaming is. So game companies want to make money first and foremost. If the game is popular, good. And if the game is actually functional and has good gameplay, even better. But these later points are not always necessary if the first point is met. Also, there is a risk and reward factor in making these kind of games. Making an RPG like Baldur's Gate is a massive undertaking. Unlike other genres, RPGs like Baldur's Gate need not only good gameplay and graphics, they need a compelling story, the ability for the player to have enough freedom inside the world and fill this world with so many things, much of what probably most people will never get to experience. In my own playthrough, I have been very careful to investigate every nook and cranny of every map, but every day I find some YouTube video or short of something I totally miss out on, and not just some obscure item, but complete storylines, quests, and interactions. The amount of things one can do and discover in Baldur's Gate 3 blew my mind. That level of dedication and detail you don't see on your normal big budget AAA RPG, and the reason is because it's too risky. For a studio like Larian, it took 6 years to develop Baldur's Gate 3 with 400 people. That's a lot of money to invest, and yes, that investment paid off, because the game was a success. Having not been chained down by some stakeholders, they took the bold move to take as long as they needed to finish their game and gamble that it would be a success. But companies want money, as we already established. Of course they do, and making games is very hard and takes a long time, and more importantly, it costs a lot of money. Having to expend so many years and resources for a game that no one knows if it's going to be a success or not. If you are a stakeholder on Activision Blizzard, you are not going to take that kind of financial risk. You will probably order another remaster of Call of Duty Modern Warfare and add a battle pass with a Barbie skin for your M4 if you complete every mission on that pass, and call it a good financial quarter. So, if you, as a big company, don't want to make big RPGs, and don't want the people to want big RPGs, you simply start to set trends on other genres like FPS and MOBAs, and if you do make an RPG, you try to do it the least amount possible to still be profitable. That's what I think started to happen at the beginning of the 2000s. At this time, with a full embrace of 3D games, flash and spectacle was what sold games. Player customization and big narratives were tossed aside in favor of action-packed combat and edgy cinematic storylines, with strict limitations on how you could roleplay them. The RPG experience was streamlined, and while the new complexities of 3D games made game development take longer, this streamlined process made up for that somewhat. And in this era was also the time where these big publishers took notice of how easy it was to make purely copy-paste sport games and FPS franchises in comparison to something like RPGs. There were some notable exceptions, as you know. Titles like Skyrim, Dark Souls, Dragon Age, and in this more cinematic approach, there are also some good games, like Dead Space, Mass Effect 1 and 2, don't really care much about 3, and let's forget Andromeda exists. But it was not what was cool in this period in time, at least not for those big publishers. These trends just kept getting bigger with the growing popularity of competitive gaming and microtransactions. RPGs were not normally suitable for constant profit unlike these other more popular genres, and publishers knew this. I must make a note that these changes were mostly seen until today in Western companies, given that RPGs are more popular in the East. Then, something unexpected happened. The indie developers started popping up more and more, with new game-making tools that made making game development relatively easy for any small group of developers to create whatever they want with a fraction of the capital the big studios have. Many of them are just working up for a passion of making games, and for some games that needed more of a monetary help, they came to places like Kickstarter to help them to get money directly from the players. So it is here that RPGs started to see a new renaissance, with people that wanted a good RPG and didn't find one out there, so they made it themselves. I mean, have you noticed how many of the new Pokémon games are a little underwhelming? Well, some people did, and they say,
"Fine. I'll do it myself."
And the result was games like Temtem, or the upcoming Baldur. So big publishers tried to choke the life out of RPGs, but indie developers came to the rescue and with that, another player in this big game of trendsetters, the streamers and influencers. Big studios can have big publishers behind them, pouring millions of dollars advertising the games. But indie developers have a bold angry man playing their game on Twitch. This big change in the power balance makes these big companies realize that they don't have the trend-setting power of the past. So now RPGs have been on the mainstream more and more every year, 2023 being one of the big ones for the genre with games like Final Fantasy XVI, Tears of the Kingdom, Starfield, Hogwarts Legacy, just to name a few. I long for the day when more epic RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3 will grace our screens and immerse us in their rich worlds. This new trend of awesome AAA RPGs is a breath of fresh air for gamers who crave more depth and complexity in their adventures, and I hope it continues. Thank you for watching and like and subscribe for more.